Hello, I'm Maria Hall Brown, and this is LA Currents. With a remarkable background in social and economic justice, housing policy, finance development, I am delighted to be joined today by the Executive Director of LA Family Housing, Stephanie Klasky-Gamer. So nice to be here.
Welcome. We're so thrilled to have you here at the Irmis Family Campus at LA Family Housing.
And the fact that we are actually in family housing, there's life, there's people. We're hearing people at home doing things around here. So that makes it, really exciting to feel like we're in the midst of everything.
We certainly are. So with our Fiesta Apartments, with our Individual Solutions Center that's part of the Irmis Family Campus, we're happy to be in the heart of it all.
You bet, where people live and do what they need to do. So let's talk about that. The mission of LA Family Housing, it started 30 years ago, which is a remarkable thing, by a group of, just concerned people with sort of a faith-based organization. So what's the nugget that ultimately became LA Family Housing?
So LA Family Housing actually formed in the early 80s, so nearly 40 years ago. We formed as two different companies, one that was based here when the group of concerned citizens came together in the San Fernando Valley to respond to a growing crisis amongst homeless families. And their strategy was to purchase actually an old motel. It was called the Fiesta Motel here in North Hollywood, and convert that motel into temporary shelter for families for up to 1 month. At the same time in the early 80s, another group of concerned citizens came together, also wanting to respond to what they saw as a growing homeless crisis. But their response was to build permanently affordable homes, to build apartment buildings where families experiencing homelessness, whether they were living in their cars or the streets or in shelters or in motels, could move immediately into an apartment that they could afford, that was safe, and they could live in indefinitely. Their recognition was that in order to end homelessness in people's lives, they needed homes.
Right.
And the organization in the San Fernando Valley also recognized that people needed homes, but their intervention at the time was really to focus on the short-term need. So nearly 40 years later, LA Family Housing remains rooted in that understanding that there are multiple solutions to end homelessness in people's lives, from the immediate short-term intervention to get people indoors off the streets, but that ultimately to permanently end homelessness for them, they need an apartment that is safe, affordable, and accessible.
Yeah, you just brought up a really important element to all of this, that there's multiple routes that people, should, can, and have taken in order to tackle this problem. And you actually have a multi-prong approach here at LA Family Housing. So I know the immediate shelter, but there's a lot more than that besides the permanent housing. So what are the focuses?
So LA Family Housing, at the core of all of our work, is rooted in the mission to help families and individuals transition out of homelessness and poverty. And we do that through a full continuum of care, from our street-based outreach teams to our interim housing, shelter if you will, bridge housing. Our bridge housing takes many shapes and forms, whether it's a single-family home that many families share together, or it's a motel converted into interim housing, or it's a congregate setting of interim housing. So we have multiple forms of interim housing. But then the core of the work falls with our staff as housing navigators and housing stabilizers who help families and individuals navigate the path into permanent housing. And then the secret nugget is to ensure that families and individuals stay stable and successful in their housing once they move into their own home. As real estate developers and homeless service providers, we have the benefit, the good fortune to be able to work along this full continuum, engaging with people still outdoors and supporting people once they move into their permanent home, and building all the housing that they need along that continuum.
So much to unpack here, so I'm going to sort of start at the beginning. You've been here, and you just told me earlier, since 2007.
Yeah.
So the world of homelessness here in Southern California has shifted. What have you seen changed in the last, well, now I'm not going to name the amount of time, but in the substantial amount of time that you've been able to witness, what's been going on? Mm-hmm. How is the topic and the tenor and the personality of homelessness changing? Is it a different type of person that becomes unhoused? Are we dealing with an additional type of person that's being unhoused? Or, how is the problem itself shifted since you started working here in 2007?
So when I joined the team 15 years ago, we were a staff of about 60 employees. Today we're a staff of nearly 500.
Wow.
We had an annual operating budget of about $6 million, and today an annual operating budget of nearly $80 million. There are resources, both human and financial resources, to address our crisis, but that kind of growth really only happened in the last 5-6 years. And that's when the community said, this is enough. For 3 decades, we have developed homelessness in Los Angeles. After 3 decades of slow growth land use policies that said, let's just keep it at 2 stories when we should have been building 4 stories.
Oh.
Let's keep it out of this neighborhood when we should have been in every neighborhood. When you have 30 years of slow growth land use decisions, you're going to end up with a lack of housing for people who need it at every income level. But then what starts happening is somebody who could have afforded this needs to rent this because that's what's available. And our clients who might have originally accessed housing at this level fell out of the market. Then you take the pandemic. We didn't have enough homes for everybody before the pandemic. But now you see a whole new crew of people falling into homelessness. Families, individuals, women, seniors, veterans, people who were working, and they might have been working low-wage jobs, but they were able to eke by and find a home that they could afford. But now they've lost that hourly wage because the restaurant they worked at was closed, or they needed to stay home because their kids had to be home and taking school in their bedroom rather than on the playground and in their classroom. That's so many more people that have fallen into homelessness. That all the good work we began doing, and I will say Los Angeles finally started to invest in new housing, in the right services, in ways that we hadn't invested 20 years before. I don't know the exact numbers, but I will tell you that in the last 5 years, we have built more housing than we did the 30 years prior.
Oh, really?
Collectively. We know what works to end homelessness in people's lives. We know that housing, that homes end homelessness. It is our best move in Los Angeles to build supportive housing for those that have experienced chronic homelessness, and we are just at the beginning of a mass production of more supportive and affordable homes throughout LA. But sadly, we got to that cusp of doing so much more at the same point that the pandemic hit and more people fell into homelessness. So we are outpacing ourselves by people falling into homelessness from those that we can move into homes every day.
Well, I'm going to sound like the big cloud of doom right now because attached to the pandemic, we are now facing even more economic issues. Yep. Because of the high cost of everything, yep, which includes the high cost of construction. Besides, yep, the personal costs of people's daily needs, which food and shelter and gasoline, etc., just the building. So how is that going to impact the good moves forward, and how is that going to impact people's psyche in terms of the work that they're doing, and how is that going to impact the amount of people who are on the cusp of really suffering some trauma in their lives?
Yeah, I really appreciate that you lifted up how will it impact the people who are doing good work.
Yes.
I will say this has been just like everyone else across the country, and of course here in Los Angeles, the pandemic has hit people personally. Mm-hmm. They've had loved ones die, they've had family members and friends die. They are living in fear of the pandemic. They are living with despair on seeing so many people fall into homelessness. And yet what we try and do for our own staff and for our community of supporters is engage and lift up to say that the work we're doing has an impact. We truly are saving people's lives, and to take pride in that and to embrace doing even more of it. But it is hard to tell a community, look, LA Family Housing, were among the first responders. We were asked by our county partners, Department of Health Services, Department of Public Health, to reach out to people at the beginning of the pandemic who were unsheltered and to bring them indoors to prevent further spread of the virus. Our outreach team became, street health educators, helping our clients who were unsheltered how to access PPE, how to use it, where to get vaccinations, how to get regularly tested, but most importantly, to encourage them to move indoors. So when you step up and can be of service to others, that becomes truly uplifting for our team, despite the burden that all of us actually have been feeling, because who we're serving are suffering so much and the volume just keeps increasing.
You work really closely with, city organizations and other organizations. So how, because this is, a 501c3 nonprofit organization that is, supported by a wide range of people and entities. How do you work with the city? Because what you just said about the city came to you and said, please, we're in a crisis. We know that you're effective. How can you help us?
We work really closely with the city, with the county, with the business and faith communities at large. But the city and the county have very unique roles, and we work with each of them, particularly because LA Family Housing is an affordable housing developer. Those funds and those land use decisions come from the city to build the housing. The county primarily manages all of the health and human service dollars across our region, so we work with them on the actual funding of the delivery of services. The city and county's partnership is critical to the success of all of our work. So we work closely both with the city and the county, and in the most ideal situation, the three of us are working like this together, because it is truly the need for the housing, the roof over people's heads, but the connection to the services so they can access that apartment and stay stable and successful in that apartment. We rely on the county and the city together.
Okay, so let me jump back to my question, which I sort of leapt over here when I asked about the city, but the idea of the things that have now become larger hurdles and challenges that I'm sure that you are, dealing with very bravely and nobly, because that's sort of the mantra of this wonderful organization. That issue of building.
Yes.
Because the issue of building is paramount for a lot of reasons. Not only are you not keeping up with but not only is the pace increasing in terms of those that are unhoused, but the ability to build, I would imagine, is slowing down for a few reasons. Cost, shortages with supplies, everything. So where do you stand in that realm right now? How are you feeling, and what are the good moves that are happening there?
So I will say, just in my 15 years at LA Family Housing, when I joined the team, we were opening up one new apartment building every 3 to 4 years. Today, we are breaking ground on 3 buildings a year and opening the doors of 3 new buildings a year.
Wow.
So our base has accelerated in every imaginable way, because we have stepped up and said, this is our most urgent need in Los Angeles, is to produce more housing and to create greater access to the housing that already exists. Master leasing apartments is an ideal way for us to quickly move people into apartments that they can afford. Developing new housing is obviously a critical way to reducing our housing crisis and closing that gap. Right now, I believe our region is required to develop 500,000 new units of housing at every income level. We aren't quite there yet.
No.
The cost to build the housing is real. It's real for a market rate developer, and it's real for us as an affordable housing developer. It's the exact same process for us. The only difference between the two developers is how we finance building the buildings. And with the financing come particular regulations. This beautiful apartment building, the Fiesta Apartments, which opened in 2018, the Fiesta Apartments is a Platinum LEED certified building, meaning all of the environmental standards that are prioritized by the state and the city are in that building. Wow. There are community rooms, there are staff offices in order to provide supportive services on site for its tenants. The tenants there are all were chronically homeless individuals living with severe and persistent mental illness. For them to succeed and stay in their homes, we have supportive services on site who may be providing life skill support, sobriety support, or support and access to mental health treatment. So in order to provide all those supportive services on site at an apartment home like the Fiesta Apartments, that requires building the space for it.
Sure.
Those are requirements. Those are good requirements that we have as we build our buildings and we use public money to build it, but it does come with a cost. And then finally, we have a public priority for living wages. So to be required prevailing wage or union wage labor at all of our developments, that drives up costs. So the environmental priorities, the supportive services priorities, and the living wage or labor rates that we're required to have in all of our buildings drives up our cost by about 30%. I don't think we should remove those priorities, but I do believe we might want to share that narrative more collectively so that we reduce the criticism on the costs. The costs are real. The costs are real for everybody doing construction, not just on the affordable housing developers. We just have a little added cost because we're trying to address some other socially beneficial priorities in our labor rates, our environmental standards, and our supportive services on site.
You're absolutely right, because we do hear about the cost of creating housing to help mitigate this issue, and that it always seems to have a pretty substantive price tag, and that becomes, you know, a political pawn, or that becomes an outcry point, or that becomes something that, you know, can be consternation driven for a lot of people. But maybe that is an important message to get out, that you're not just talking about a building with a few rooms, you're talking about how the building was made, what the building contains, and all the support that goes in. Which leads me to my next question, the stability factor.
Yeah.
You're very proud of the stability factor and the sustainability factor of those that you do help. What's the secret of success there to make sure that once someone does have the opportunity to move into a place like this, or does reach out to you for bridge housing or whatever, that they maintain a level of lifestyle stability and that they just don't fall back into becoming a statistic again?
I think the key to our success, whether we're building bridge housing, which is temporary interim, or we are building permanently supportive housing, which is a permanent home, everybody here signs a lease and pays rent. The key to success in anything that we build or in any service that we deliver is that we do it in a way that meets the needs of our participants. Nobody is going to come inside if the operations or the buildings are substandard.
Sure.
They need to be treated, all of our participants need to be treated with respect and dignity, and that comes to how we design a building and who we hire to deliver services in that building, and then the types of services that are delivered. So do we have a curfew? No, this is an apartment building. Do we regulate what people eat inside their room? No, it's their home. They pay rent and they live here. Do we help manage how they can be a good tenant? Do we help mitigate trauma that could be experienced in the community, in the home, by our residents living there? Of course. And we also really pay attention to what is trauma informed in the design of our buildings and in the operation of our services.
But what about the financial stability part? Because they have to pay rent, and there have been a lot of life issues that have thrown a lot of people off, let alone people that are sort of on the cusp of recreating their existence. So how are you helping them with the stability financially?
Yeah. So the majority of our tenants in all of our apartment buildings do receive some form of rental subsidy.
Okay.
Maybe it's a benefit that they have from being a veteran. Maybe it comes from the Department of Mental Health. Maybe it comes from our housing authority. There are multiple forms of rental subsidy, and we try and align those subsidies with each of our buildings so that tenants pay 30% of their income, no matter what their income is. They have some form of income, albeit modest. It could be their social Social Security disability income, it could be their veteran benefits, it could be their recycling revenue. They pay 30% of their income no matter what their income is, and then whoever issued them the rental subsidies covers the rest of the operating costs for our apartment building.
There are a lot of organizations doing a lot of good work across Southern California, but the problem obviously has its hurdles, its challenges, its focus of attention, and its escalation, no doubt whatsoever. How difficult is it to sort of manage the cooperation and the coordination? I mean, should there be more cooperation, coordination, or is everybody just working really hard in their little niche and we should just accept that and understand that and be responsive to it?
So the way Los Angeles's homeless service delivery system, this is across the county, is designed, it recognizes this is a regional crisis of homelessness that demands regional solutions. So we can't piecemeal one solution in this council district, a different solution in this council district, because our clients don't care whether they are in one council district or another.
Sure.
They don't know the street boundary differentials.
Sure.
We need to respond as a community addressing a regional crisis. But I will say, LA County is huge. LA County is huge with 88 cities. How we address homelessness from Lancaster or the Antelope Valley to how we address homelessness in Venice to how we address homelessness in Pacific Palisades or Panorama City. It does need to be unique for the region we're in, but then the partners who work together in that region, we do all collaborate. We do collaborate, you know, who provides interim housing, who provides permanent housing, who's doing street outreach here, who does street outreach there. The worst thing for any of our participants, whether they are unsheltered or living inside, is duplication of services. They're exhausted by that. And so we have come up with a really strong regional approach across the county where there is coordination among the different providers. We are funded differently to provide specific services that all coordinate with each other. So we have weekly meetings with all the outreach workers that work here in what we call Service Planning Area 2, which is the entire San Fernando and Santa Clarita Valleys. We meet with all the outreach workers once a week to just touch base. Hey, did anyone see where Adam went? I saw him at this intersection, and someone says, oh, he's over here now.
It gets that
Great.
personal.
It gets that personal. We do have a name-by-name registry. We do have a really strong homeless management information system where I could look up your name and birth date and see the last case manager you spoke to and what commitments he or she made for you, so that when you're moving down to Long Beach and you say, I've never received any services, actually we can look it up and see that you used to receive services in Spa 2 and now you want to be in Spa 8. There is really strong coordination. I think that's hard to realize and believe when you are driving down the street and you see so many people outside.
I was going to say, you know, I think the messaging probably is even more complicated than the problem because, you know, the messaging gets cut off, or it only gets heard with one ear, or it only gets, you know, heard by somebody who is, you know, not fully informed. But, you know, being an optimistic person, you obviously are, or else you wouldn't be dedicated to this field for so long. Where do you see things going? I mean, despite economy, pandemic, escalation of, you know, people who are on the cusp of being unhoused, where do your hopes and dreams lie?
My hopes and dreams lie in changing the narrative. I want people to feel confident that they've seen success. They've seen success in one person who they used to see outside of their grocery store every week, who moved into interim housing, moved into their own home. I think our best move is developing more housing. Our best move is supportive housing across Los Angeles, because with that, we will see success. We will see people moving off of our streets. But we have to change the narrative that nothing's getting done. Because, as you said, I'm an optimistic person, but I also rely on data. There is a ton getting done, and there are thousands of people's lives who are transitioning out of homelessness and poverty every day. We just need to share their stories.
Better to light a candle than to curse the darkness.
There you go.
Yes. All right, if people want to learn more and help you in any of your ways, because obviously I know you deal with a lot of, not only financial needs, but, human support needs.
Yep.
What's the best way for people to get more of this story?
Visit us at LA Family Housing. On all social media channels, you can look up LA Family Housing, and our website is a great first start, lafh.org.
Well, thank you so much, Stephanie, for sharing this space, enjoying the bright sunshine and the lovely Southern California heat, and spending time with me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much. We're so grateful to the city for your partnership and love being able to talk with our fellow Angelinos.
And that's a wrap on this LA Currents.